A Captain and a Madman by RazielZonoran. Chapter 11, Detroit. It took a little while for the doctor's smug satisfaction, and his burning anger, to fade away. He had initially set a course back for the Alcharon V colony, fully intending to stop the newest catastrophe before it could take root. Hell, he'd go back to the Enterprise and seek Picard's help if he had to, for he had no doubt the starship captain wouldn't turn down the opportunity to save thousands of lives yet again. But as the hundreds and hundreds of plots and plans whirled through the doctor's mind, a grain of something far less welcome began to wriggle its way in. The TARDIS had very nearly reached its destination when, suddenly, the doctor pulled her to a stop, leaving her in deep space a few dozen light years, and a score of temporal years, from its destination. Pragmatism had settled in because, put simply, he knew there was no point. He could have stopped that asteroid, yes, he had no doubt. But this wasn't just some natural disaster to be averted, this wasn't even a lone alien attack to be thwarted. This was a coordinated, concentrated effort by a group of beings capable of time travel more or less and determined to ensure history came to pass the way they intended. The resulting struggle could last, from the perspective of those fighting it, forever, with both sides constantly changing time in a strategic battle waged in the shadows. Indeed, as much as the doctor hated to admit it, they had the advantage in such a situation. He couldn't risk crossing his own timeline too much, knowing the disaster that such a paradox would bring, but the future Starfleet had dozens, if not hundreds, of time agents, all ready to go back and contribute to the destruction of the colony in a variety of exciting ways. It didn't matter how good you were at chess, if the other player got to move 5 pieces every time you moved one. And this wasn't an enemy he could simply cast out, or destroy. They were humans, the future of mankind, and as much as he found their practices despicable, he also could see very grudgingly where they came from. They would kill him, if they had to end this. He didn't think he'd be able to do the same to them. So it didn't matter how many times he saved that colony. The Starfleet of the future would just destroy it again. Sighing softly, the doctor ran his hands down his face, drawing in a shuddering breath as he all but forced himself to let go of his piqued temper, his hurt pride, because he had to admit, some of his ire was because they had interfered in the doctor's actions, something he never really enjoyed. Instead, he turned his attention to what, if anything, had troubled him even more than the fate of the colony. The fate of the other doctor. A perusal of the files he had borrowed from the Relativity's computers confirmed much of what Duquesne had said. These agents had devoted a rather flattering amount of resources to tracking him down, traveling to points in time and space where the mysterious doctor had been said to make an appearance. But every attempt had been a failure, with the catastrophe in question either having been averted by some other means or, in some cases, the catastrophes simply never having happened. So many incidents that, on the Enterprise D's computer, had been claimed as fact had, by the 29th century, been completely debunked. Indeed, a poor bloke named Gary Seven in the late 1960s had been accosted by these wankers for just that reason, which would have made it the second time he'd clashed with humanity's future. He had apparently hospitalized 2 time agents before everything was finally settled. Perhaps one could have explained the lack of solid doctor encounters as time being rewritten at some point, these disasters erased by a madman in a box, but if that were the case, why did the reports of them persist? It was as if the stories simply came from nowhere. The doctor did notice, however, that at the time of his meeting with the Relativity, there were still a little over 100 rumored incidents, still unexplored. Head tilting, he started to scroll through them slowly, stopping about halfway down as one incident in particular leapt out at him. "Oh, hello there, gorgeous," he murmured, licking his lips as he found a rather tasty-looking historical morsel. A police report, the testimony of some man deemed drug-addled by the authorities. The man's testimony spoke of lizard people, ray guns, a mysterious item that may well be a doomsday weapon capable of killing all humans on the planet. Definitely sounded like something the doctor would be interested in. In fact, it all sounded a little like the Silurians, which would have made this the only reference he had found to the reptilian pre-human inhabitants of Earth for that matter. It was a slim thread, granted. But maybe the report had interested the other doctor as well, because apparently somebody had come, saved the planet with advanced technology, and promptly vanished without another word. A pair, actually, a man and a woman. Grinning with delight, the doctor quickly keyed in a set of time-space coordinates and spurred the TARDIS into motion, the time rotor's grinding beginning to increase in speed as it careened through the vortex. Dash 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 dash. When he stepped out into the crisp air of nighttime Detroit, at the beginning of the 21st century, the doctor gave a reflexive cough. After having spent the last little while on utterly clean, hygienic starships, the taste of air pollution was both uncomfortable and yet welcoming familiar. The streets were all but deserted at this time of night, populated by aging, silent warehouses and crumbling apartment complex, and as he adjusted his bow tie, he couldn't help but let a little smile cross his face. Much better, the doctor murmured, tugging at his jacket and glancing at his watch to confirm the time. At least this 21st century Earth doesn't look too different from mine. Now, where was that warehouse? He had left himself a couple of hours worth of leeway to investigate this supposed incident, considering he honestly wasn't certain where to look first. He had parked the TARDIS about a block and a half away from the location the police had nabbed their eventual confessor, some drug-abusing bloke named Loomis. From what the police report had said, this man had kidnapped several people and strapped them to tables in an abandoned warehouse, all apparently at the behest of these aliens. He'd been found unconscious in a stolen car the morning after, and had been promptly charged with a really impressive list of crimes. Anyway, first step was to track down where he needed to be, assuming this wasn't just some drug addict's fever dream. Turning in a quick circle, the doctor's sonic screwdriver buzzed as he ran a quick scan for any nearby non-terrestrial technology, giving a satisfied little hum as he studied the results. Much to his delight, there was indeed several readings indicating non-terrestrial technology, in the very same warehouse this druggie was destined to be found in. There we are, the doctor murmured, satisfaction written all over his face as he set off at a brisk pace, pausing occasionally to scan again. The readings were concentrated in one warehouse in particular, and as he drew nearer, the doctor began to pick up other life signs, several of them human, and 3 decidedly not. There were several entrances, most of them boarded up. A small device was affixed to the doorway of one of the entrances that hadn't been. It was clearly a scanner that would alert the occupants if anyone entered. A quick buzz with his screwdriver disrupted it just long enough to allow him undetected entry, at which point the doctor decided it was time to prioritize. Curious as he was to meet this aliens, he had to make sure the humans weren't in any immediate danger. He found the humans soon enough, over half a dozen of them lying unconscious in a single room with IVs strapped to their arms. Moving quietly and carefully, the doctor paused just long enough to scan the area the alien lifeforms were close, but not too close before he moved to the nearest human, a young woman. Checking her pulse with 2 fingers, he pried her eyelid open, peered into her sightless gaze for a moment, then finally passed his screwdriver over her, frowning as he examined the readings. "Let's give you a checkup." The doctor frowned a little before giving a satisfied grunt, patting her idly on the arm as he spoke, quite pointlessly, to her unconscious form. "Sedated. Nothing serious. You'll be fine when you wake up, but what are you doing here in the first place?" As the sound of approaching footsteps filled the air, the Time Lord's eyes widened, head swiveling from one side, and then to the other as he looked for somewhere to hide. In the end, he had to settle for pressing himself into a shadowed nook underneath a nearby metal stairwell, crouching behind a small stack of boxes and holding his breath. Footsteps. Big, heavy, and then the faint sound of the doors swinging open. Though the Time Lord was very tempted to peek out and see what was happening, he decided for once to show an element of patience, ears straining to catch any possible detail. As it turned out, whoever was out there, they didn't give much consideration for secrecy, as one spoke up gruffly. 15 milliliters from the new arrival. Some more sounds, shifting, rustling, and then the footsteps were receding, back towards the exit. As soon as he heard the doors swing open and shut, the Time Lord was on the move, slipping out from cover. At first, his eyes were locked on the doors, but as he started to cross the room, a flicker of movement caught the corner of his eye, his head whipping towards the source. "Strange," he murmured, frowning. He thought one of the humans, a male, had moved, but when he glanced back over, the man still lay there, eyes closed. The doctor's eyes flickered for a moment to the door, then to the human, and though he considered subjecting the man to a scan as well, he realized he had more pressing concerns right now, such as the mysterious aliens and their equally mysterious agenda. Could they be Silurians? Was another doctor about to arrive and save the day? Moving quickly, the doctor stepped out into the hall. Faint voices to the left had him moving towards the source, keeping in a low crouch, sonic screwdriver out. He was perhaps halfway there when he suddenly heard footsteps closing in front behind. Whirling around, the doctor pointed his sonic forward, head leaning back when he realized he was staring down the barrel of a silver weapon of some kind. It was the human male, who was decidedly not sedated, and pointing some extremely non-terrestrial technology back at him. Well, perhaps not non-terrestrial, but certainly nothing fitting the time period. As the doctor's eyes flitted from the weapon to the man's face, he realized something odd. The human didn't have the confused, twitchy expression of a man who's woken up with no knowledge of where he is. On the contrary, the doctor suspected this human knew exactly what he was doing here. "Hold it right there," the human growled, keeping the curious, silvery weapon raised as he squinted at the decidedly non-human screwdriver clutched in the Time Lord's grip. "Who are you? Did Daniels send you? Are you working with the Xindi?" "Daniels," the doctor echoed, keeping his voice down, but not lowering his sonic, though he wasn't entirely certain what he intended to do with it. The weapon in the man's hand didn't look as compact or advanced as that of the Relativity's security force. In fact, it looked even bulkier than those on Kirk's Enterprise. "Don't know any Daniels, and Xindi. What the bloody hell's a Xindi?" The human seemed to pause at that, dark eyes narrowing a little as the weapon wavered, just for a moment. The two began to circle each other slowly, hands still raised, until they each had their back to the corridor wall, feeling marginally more secure. "You've never heard of the Xindi?" the human echoed, sounding almost incredulous. "No," the doctor snapped. He was starting to get seriously tired of people pointing guns at him. "I only got as far as W in the anthropological database, only had a couple of days to poke through it, so I ask you again, what is a shin?" A sudden high-pitched whine filled the air as a bright energy bolt passed between the two men, striking the far wall in an explosion of sparks. The doctor and the human both dove in opposite directions, taking cover behind two sets of heavy crates before peering around the corner warily. Another blinding flash sent them scurrying back behind their various points of cover, but in the brief view, the Time Lord had caught the briefest glimpse of reptilian creatures moving across the room. Pressing himself up against the crates, the doctor drew a deep breath, eyes rolling a little as he called to the human. "I take it those are Xindi." "Yeah, that's a pretty safe bet," the human snapped, peering around the corner and firing a blast from his phase pistol. "Look, if Daniels didn't send you here to help, then what the hell are you doing here? Who sent you? Whose side are you on?" "Now," the doctor exclaimed, ducking further behind the wall as another energy blast sent off a fresh shower of sparks. "You want to interrogate me now? Well, now seems to be as good a time as any." The human bellowed, firing another quick pair of shots back across the complex. "I've got enough enemies to deal with as it is, without turning my back to another." "Well, here's a thought," the doctor bellowed right back. "The ones trying to shoot you. Definitely the enemies. Let's just give everyone who isn't shooting at you the benefit of the doubt. Oh, saw this." With that, the Time Lord all but vaulted over the cover he had made for himself, stalking down the hall grimly. As a Xindi popped out, weapon raised, the doctor lifted his sonic screwdriver and emitted a sharp, high-pitched buzz, causing the alien weapon to explode in a shower of sparks. Cursing, the reptilian dropped the weapon and tried to fall back, only to get drilled with a fatal blast from the human's weapon. A second and third alien were already in full retreat, and as the doctor's arm snapped out, and a second weapon was disabled, but they vanished from sight a moment later. Dropping to one knee beside the fallen reptilian, the doctors passed over him in a quick wave. A glance at the readout elicited a sigh from him. Not Silurian, clearly. And, worse, dead. The human, meanwhile, had sprinted past him down the hall, and it was with several irritated mutterings that the Time Lord took off in pursuit. They soon came to a wide room, the far side of which was flanked by several makeshift lights, and in the center of which was a piece of decidedly non-terrestrial technology. A nearby door hung ajar. The human examined the device for a brief moment, then began to look increasingly agitated when he couldn't find what he wanted. "You let them get away," the human snapped, hauling out a small device and flipping it open with a chirp. To pull, they've headed out the west door, they've got the virus. Yes, well, we're not all quite as gung-ho about murder. The doctor snapped back, scowling as he gave the large, alien machine a cursory examination. I've seen enough of those weapons you've got there by now to know there's a stun setting. Ever consider using it? You don't get it. Shoving the Time Lord none too gently aside, the human was already going through the door, calling back as he ran down the corridor, the biotoxin they're carrying's enough to wipe out half of Earth's population. Dash 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 dash. Rak was one of the finest warriors the reptilians had to offer. A brilliant tactician, as well as among the most physically powerful. It was for this very reason that he had been chosen for this most crucial of missions, and he was well aware that its success could very well secure the safety of their entire people. So it was hardly a surprise that the sudden turn of events, with the intrusion of a human and a simian creature in a bowtie that smelled nothing like a proper human, had him already thinking of alternatives. His comrade Rock and he quickly sprinted down a dank hallway, seeking freedom, or at least enough breathing room to find a proper place for ambush. But it turned out they were the ones to be ambushed, for as they burst out into the alleyway, a car parked nearby gave a sudden honk, a woman's voice rising in protest. Snarling, Rock opened fire with his weapon, but though neither could see the dark interior well enough to tell if they'd scored a hit, the return fire suggested it hadn't been enough. Rock fell under that onslaught, leaving only an unarmed Rak to carry on the mission. But as the reptilian burst into motion, sprinting down the street and expecting to be shot at any moment, he heard sounds of a struggle coming from inside the car. Perhaps their human collaborator had been captured, and was even now trying to slow these pursuers down. Such service would earn him a slightly quicker death, at least. It took some quick thinking, and quicker feet, but the Zindi managed to shake his pursuers, for a few moments at least. Climbing onto a rooftop, panting for breath, the reptilian finally took cover behind an air conditioning duct, clutching the canister of biotoxin to his chest. His weapon had been disabled by the strange humanoid, and he had no spare. His battle prowess aside, he knew that he stood no chance against his pursuers and their own considerable technology. But he still had the temporal beacon, his only means back to his time period. And the virus, while not entirely complete, could still land a devastating blow to the simian human scum. Perhaps it would be better to take his winnings and leave, as it were. Setting the canister down for a moment, Rak tugged the beacon from his belt and began to fiddle with it, seeking extraction quickly, before the humans. A low whir filled the air, and the beacon suddenly erupted into a shower of sparks. Snarling, Rak instinctively dropped the device and whirled in a complete circle. He didn't see anybody. At least, not until a low whistle caused him to glance up atop a nearby alcove that housed access to the building stairwell, on top of which, the strange-smelling human sat, waving a hand slightly. Sorry, the odd man chirped, that just seemed really important, so I thought, better break it. His hands popped out from behind his back, a long metallic canister held in them. It wasn't until Rak looked down at his feet that he realized the stranger had stolen the virus while his back was turned. For that matter, I'm guessing you don't want this smashed either, just yet anyway, so I'd be nice and quiet unless you want to serve. With a growl, the Zindi lunged, starting to climb onto the alcove in pursuit. Oh, wait, you'd want to break it. The doctor's other hand snapped out, sonic screwdriver. Humming to life, and then rising to an abrupt squeal. For Rak, there was only pain. Pure, blinding pain as the sound seemed to cut right through his mind, sending every sense into a cacophony of agony. Clutching both sides of his head, the Zindi staggered and dropped to one knee, drawing in deep, ragged breaths but refusing to voice his discomfort with so much as a grunt. Sorry. The doctor shouted to be heard over the sound, wincing as he hopped off the stairwell, keeping the wand raised as he drew closer. I know it's uncomfortable, but you're not giving me much of a choice here. Why don't you just? Rak was a warrior without equal, bred and trained for battle. Though the pain was overwhelming, the reptilian marshaled his inner reserves of strength and then, with a savage roar, lunged forward all at once, a scaled hand lashing out in a backhand. The silvery wand was knocked clear out of the doctor's hand, skittering across the rooftop, even as the reptilian's other hand lashed out, grabbing the scrawny man by the throat. The supersonic squeal died the moment the stranger was disarmed, and it was with a growl of pleasure that the Zindi lifted with just a single arm, hauling the doctor into the air until his toes dangled just above the ground. "Wait," the Time Lord croaked, both hands clutching at the arm that was choking him. "You sure you don't want to discuss this a moment?" A sudden arc of phaser fire came out of nowhere, catching the reptilian square between the shoulder blades. Arms flying out wide, the Zindi staggered, groaned, and toppled forward, breath rattling in his chest as the very last thing he saw was the mysterious man with the bow tie, scolding his killers. Dash 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 dash. "Are you all right?" the human male asked as he jogged over, a stern-looking woman in tow, but the doctor was too busy feeling righteous to notice. "I had the situation perfectly under control." The Time Lord snapped at the new arrivals as he rubbed his neck gingerly, catching them both a little off guard, and making them very uncomfortable, as one of the arms he was waving had the silver container of potentially civilization-ending biotoxin clutched in it. "And for the second time, have you lot never considered using the sodding stun function?" The human's eyes flickered, quite nervously, to the container under the Time Lord's arm. "Stun doesn't work on them. We've tried before, they just shrug it off." Oh, that seemed to mollify the doctor, at least a little, but then he just straightened a bit, voice stern. "Well, you'll just need to find a better stun in the future." Thank you, for stopping the choking." "Any time." Inching forward just a little, the human's eyes didn't drift from the container. "I don't suppose you could put that down." The odd man glanced at the cylinder, then waved a hand distractedly. "This is the virus you mentioned, then." "Oh, don't fret, they didn't remove the container, this is just the external shielding. Durasteel containment pod, remarkably tough, I could throw this off the building and the interior contents would be fine, not a scratch on them. Not that I'm going to, mind you." The doctor added hastily, as his assurance had only seemed to alarm the pair considerably, causing them to take a half-step closer with weapons raised. "So be much obliged if you'd just lower the weapons and please stop looking like you're waiting to tackle me around the knees. You want the container. Here, you can hold onto it if it makes you feel safer." The male all but snatched the virus pod away when he was offered, grimacing a little as he handed it to the woman. "There, all better." The Time Lord beamed. "So, who are you lot? Not those buggers from the Relativity, are you?" The human looked, if anything, more confused. "I'm Jonathan Archer, this is T'Pol." "Right, the one you warned about the Zindi." The doctor paused, blinking at the woman. Her hair had done a remarkable job hiding those pointed ears, so much so he hadn't even realized she wasn't human. T'Pol. Vulcan name, that. A Vulcan. Love Vulcans, extremely bright bunch, terrible comedians, but quick as a collection of whips tied together to make some sort of super whip. Since when have Vulcans been capable of time travel? The woman's eyes flickered as she replied, that is to say, I. What she means to say, Archer replied, deadpanned, extending a hand to solemnly gesture at their surroundings, is that the Vulcan Science Directorate has deemed that time travel is impossible. Well, all right, the doctor amended. They eventually become a bright bunch. But seriously, impossible. That would put you lot as early as the 22nd century. Oh, hell, Jonathan Archer. Something about the names, combined with the time period, had triggered a recollection from his studies of Starfleet's history. Archer's eyes flickered towards T'Pol, before looking back at the doctor. Yes. After a long, disbelieving pause, the doctor's arms sprang up as he turned around, marching off in the other direction and rambling as he started to climb off the roof, the other pair apparently forgotten. I can't bloody swing my arms without hitting captains of the Enterprise. Enterprise this, Enterprise that, not like there weren't another 1,000 ships in sodding Starfleet over the 200-year stretch to Picard. Why didn't they ever stumble on anything remotely interesting in their journeys, or were they all populated by the laziest layabouts the human race could squeeze into a bloody uniform? 4. Considering they had the virus, and the strange man didn't exactly seem a world-ending threat, Archer wasn't entirely certain what to do about him, or rather, if he should even try and stop the man from leaving. As the doctor vanished down a fire escape, however, the captain sighed and tossed a small box to T'Pol. Tag everything for retrieval, he instructed, "I'm just going to see what our new, friend is up to." Breaking into a jog, Archer reached the edge of the roof just in time to see the doctor reach the sidewalk, where he immediately began marching away, still waving his arms, still ranting about something or other. Quickly, the human began to take the steps 3 at a time, nearly losing his balance more than once as he sought to catch up to the meandering man. Reaching the street just a minute later, he took off in a full sprint. As he neared a street corner, he could hear the most peculiar grinding noise, but it wasn't until he rounded the corner that he saw the source. It was a police box. It was a disappearing police box. Even for someone who had just saved the Earth past and present from reptilian aliens, thanks to the help of an enigmatic 31st century time traveler and a rambling man in a bow tie. That was just a little too weird. So, bereft of alternatives, Archer said the only thing that seemed to fit. Huh. Dash 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 dash. Well, that was disappointing, the doctor muttered, even as he hopped up to the TARDIS control console, sighing softly as he tugged one of the monitors over. I come looking for a doctor, I end up finding a captain. Again. I mean, what are the odds? I just happened to end up colliding with another bloody Enterprise bunch. This pair seemed to be grumpier than the rest, at that, which is saying something when you consider the permanent frown on Commander Spock's face. More troubling, however, was Archer's reference to Daniels. Presumably the fellow was responsible for sending the pair of them back in time, which meant it was probably the same faction that had been so determined to slap a leash on the doctor. Setting a quick course towards the dawn of life on Earth, figuring it was as good a place as any to hide out until he'd made his next move, the doctor turned his attention back to the monitor, fingers drumming on his console as he skimmed the remaining files. Nothing really leapt out at him, however, and after a few frustrated minutes he slammed a hand down onto the monitor, starting to pace. Damn it, all right, think doctor, think, there's a reasonable, perfectly sane explanation for this. Lips curling as he tried to fend off what he realized was a rising sense of panic. Come on, maybe there's nobody named the doctor here. That Gary 7 lad, his servo was loads like a screwdriver. No, he wasn't a time traveler, unless he was lying, but he registered as human, chameleon arch. Ridiculous. Think. And then he froze in place, a little nugget of information tugging at him. All right, the doctor murmured, cracking his fingers and giving them a quick wiggle as he peered at the monitor. Different tactic, then. Don't look for mysteries that haven't been solved, look for mysteries that were solved with a different answer. Speaking of Archer, where, time ship, advanced technology, bigger on the inside than the. Gotcha. Filled with new energy, new determination, the doctor quickly entered a new set of coordinates, even as he muttered. Suppose I'm doomed to deal with every Enterprise.